I don't know when it started exactly. Maybe sometime last winter or maybe years before that. But I remember the morning when I finally noticed it. It was 6:30 a.m. just like any other weekday. My alarm had gone off twice already. The apartment was quiet in that heavy way it gets before sunrise when even the street outside feels tired. I shuffled into the bathroom, still half asleep, still carrying that small dread that wakes up before I do. The light over the mirror buzzed faintly. It was a little too bright, the kind of light that doesn't flatter anyone, especially someone who hasn't slept well in a while. I turned on the faucet, splashed some cold water on my face, and looked up. There I was, or at least some version of me. A little puffy around the eyes, a little older than I pictured myself in my mind. A little worn out from another night of staying up too late, scrolling through other people's victories. And before I even opened my mouth, the first thought of the day rose up, like it had been waiting for me. I should be further by now. Not said out loud, not whispered, just felt. A quiet sentence that didn't need sound to take over the whole room. And the mirror, that old scratch thing that came with the apartment, didn't argue. It never does. It just reflected back whatever script my brain decided to run that day. The little scratches on the surface caught the light, making my reflection look cracked at the edges like an old photograph someone folded too many times. Somehow, it always made the thought feel truer than it was. I stood there brushing my teeth with my phone balanced on the sink, reading headlines I wish I didn't read so early. People my age buying homes, people my age changing careers, people my age launching businesses, running marathons, starting families, posting vacation photos with perfect lighting and perfect captions. Every swipe down was another reminder of something I hadn't done. Every article was a yardstick I never seemed to measure up to. And sometime between rinsing my mouth and reaching for a towel, another thought slid in, soft and sharp at the same time. You're behind. It was familiar, too familiar, like a neighbor who talks through the walls every morning. I didn't say it out loud because saying it would make it feel pathetic, but the mirror heard it anyway. If someone else had been in that tiny bathroom with me, someone gentle, someone wise, maybe they would have rested a hand on my shoulder and said something like Fred Rogers once said to the world, "You're doing the best you can right now, and that counts." But I didn't have that voice in my head, not then. I only had the script, the same one that had been looping for years. Aaron Beck, the founder of cognitive therapy, once wrote something that keeps coming back to me. The first step to change is noticing the thought, not obeying it. Back then, though, I wasn't noticing anything. I was just obeying, without even realizing it. It's strange how quiet suffering can be. How it doesn't always look like crying or breaking down or losing control. Sometimes it just looks like a person standing in front of a mirror, breathing slowly, trying to convince themselves that today will somehow be different, even though nothing changed overnight. I'd always thought of myself as strong. I'd worked through deadlines that should have broken me. I'd handled disappointment with a shaky kind of dignity. I'd survived layoffs, long nights, heartbreaks, and the constant pressure to catch up to everyone else. But no one ever warned you that sometimes the hardest battles happen in the smallest rooms, in the simplest moments, with the quietest thoughts. I grabbed my coffee mug, chipped on one side, like me, and walked to the window. The sky was just starting to lighten. The usual sounds floated up from the street. A bus sighing to a stop. Someone unlocking a storefront. A woman walking her dog while talking softly into her headphones. Life going on. People doing their best. Everyone trying to move forward in their own way. And there I was, standing there, holding a mug that had seen better days, staring at a morning that felt exactly like the one before it. I told myself not to check my phone again. I checked anyway. It was such a small confession, but it felt important somehow. The way these habits shape the day before the day even starts. I looked down at the coffee, then at my reflection in the dark window, then back at the scratched mirror inside the bathroom. The symbol kept returning. That reflection I couldn't quite trust, and a question rose up in me, quiet but persistent. When did my thoughts start speaking to me like I was the enemy? I didn't have the answer then, but asking it, even silently, felt like the first time I turned toward myself instead of away. The morning moved on. I got dressed. I packed my bag. I told myself, it's fine, it's nothing. But somewhere in me, I knew it wasn't nothing. Somewhere in me, I knew this script, this "you're behind" story, wasn't mine. I'd inherited it from 100 comparisons, 1,000 small disappointments, and every quiet morning when I'd let that harsh voice speak without ever asking where it came from. And as I reached for my keys, I caught one last glimpse of myself in the mirror, the scratches glowing in the early sun, and I wondered, almost out loud, what would happen if I stopped believing everything I think? The question sat with me. It still does. Some nights feel heavier than others. That night began like any ordinary weekday evening, a little tired, a little hungry, a little ready for the day to be over. But it ended with me sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at the fogged mirror like it had something to say. The trouble started earlier, long before the steam blurred the glass. Work went badly. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of scene people write movies about. It was just a client picking apart a draft I'd worked on for days. The notes weren't cruel, but they weren't kind either. A colleague got praised in the group chat for something small, and I felt that pinch of jealousy I'm never proud of. My partner sent a short, distracted text that made me feel strangely alone. And dinner, well, that burned too. Then I opened my bank app, and that was when the quiet unraveling began. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was being emotional. I told myself to get it together. But all those small disappointments, the ones I brushed off all day, stacked themselves into a weight I could feel in my chest. I carried that weight into the bathroom. The mirror was already fogged from my shower, softening everything, hiding the details I was too tired to face. But even through the mist, I could see the outline of myself. Shoulders slumped, head heavy, the posture of someone who'd been pretending to be okay for too long. That's when the thought hit me. Not a whisper this time. Not a quiet sentence sliding into my morning like a cold draft. No, this one arrived with force. Maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I never was. I stood still, and in that pause, that terrible, suspended moment, it felt true. That's the awful thing about certain thoughts. They know exactly when you're too tired to fight back. Aaron Beck described moments like these as cognitive distortions. Twisted thoughts that feel real because they're loud, not because they're accurate. But in that moment, I wasn't naming distortions, I was drowning in them. All or nothing thinking. If I wasn't impressive today, maybe I'm not impressive at all. Discounting the positive. Sure, I've done good things, but they don't count anymore. Catastrophizing. One bad day means everything is falling apart. The mirror, my old scratch companion, suddenly looked harsh. The fog was clearing, revealing the tiny cracks and scratches on its surface. And somehow, the imperfections made my reflection feel even harder to look at, like the mirror was telling the truth I was afraid to name. I sank down to the floor, back against the cabinet, cold tiles pressing through my shirt. My phone buzzed in my hand, another success story on social media, another person hitting a milestone I hadn't reached. I hated how much it affected me. I hated that tiny drop of shame that settled inside my chest. I scrolled anyway. I always do. That's when the thought, the worst one yet, rose up inside me. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest in a painful way. If I don't change now, I will lose myself. Not my job, not my reputation, myself. The part of me that still dreams. The part of me that believes in possibility. The part of me that keeps showing up, even when everything feels too heavy. The hidden cost hit me fully then. All these months, years maybe, of letting harsh thoughts narrate my life. What had they stolen? Confidence, hope, the ability to celebrate small wins, the belief that I was allowed to grow slowly. All of it had been slipping away, one unchallenged thought at a time. I wasn't the only one either. Earlier that week, I talked to a friend, a night shift nurse, who told me she cried in the supply closet sometimes because she felt like she should be stronger after 5 years in the job. She said, "I'm tired of feeling like I'm failing at everything, even resting." Her voice cracked on the word resting. I didn't know what to say then, but her words stayed with me. I thought of a guy I once met at the bus stop, a middle-aged mechanic with grease under his nails and kind eyes. He told me he'd been laid off twice, and each time he felt like a man falling behind while everyone else kept driving. We only talked for 5 minutes, but something in the way he looked away when he said it told me the shame was deeper than the words.
I thought about a young immigrant cashier at the corner store who studies English during slow hours. He once told me he rereads job listings every night, wondering if his dream of getting a better job sounds stupid at my age. I'd wanted to tell him it wasn't stupid, but my words felt small compared to the size of his fear. And then there was my coworker, a single father with 2 jobs. He once said, "I just want to give my kids a good life, but sometimes I feel like I'm failing 2 roles at once." The exhaustion in his face made my stomach twist. Different stories, different lives, same quiet ache. We're all trying, and still, we all think we're behind. A viral quote drifted into my mind. I'd seen it 100 times online. Don't believe everything you think. I looked up at the scratched mirror again, the fog finally gone. My reflection stared back, tired, unsure, but somehow softer. Maybe because I finally saw the truth. I wasn't fighting the world. I was fighting myself and losing. I pulled my knees to my chest and let out a breath I'd been holding for years. The bathroom was silent except for the faint hum of the fan and the sound of my breathing, steadying slowly. It wasn't rock bottom. It wasn't a breakdown. It was something quieter, something I can only describe as a moment of reckoning, the kind that comes after too many days of pretending nothing is wrong. The mirror didn't fix me. It didn't offer wisdom. It just reflected what had been true for a long time. I couldn't keep living inside a story that hurt me. And sitting there, on a cold tile floor with my phone dimming in my hand, I realized something simple, something terrifying, something hopeful. I had to learn a new script, or lose myself trying to survive the old one. Change didn't happen the next morning. I wish I could say I woke up, stretched, smiled at the mirror, and suddenly felt whole again. But that's not how real life works. That's not how our minds work. Thoughts don't rewrite themselves overnight. Scripts don't soften just because we want them to. Healing starts small, almost too small to notice at first. For me, the shift began with a text message. It came from a friend I hadn't talked to in a while. Someone who always sees through the version of me that tries too hard to look okay. She'd seen something I posted online the night before, a vague line about feeling tired. Nothing dramatic, but she knew. Some people just know. Her message was simple. You're too hard on yourself. Try to speak to yourself like someone you love. I stared at that sentence for a long time. 14 words, soft ones, true ones. I didn't know what to do with them. I rolled my eyes at first, a protective habit I've learned over years of deflecting kindness. But something inside me softened, just a little, like a knot loosening, like my chest getting 1 quiet inch more breathable. I set my phone down and walked to the bathroom, drawn by something I couldn't name.
The mirror was still scratched. Of course it was. But the morning light made the scratches glow instead of glare. It was strange how different it felt, as if nothing had changed and everything had changed. I stepped closer. This time, I didn't look at the tiredness around my eyes. I didn't look at the imperfections. I looked at the human being standing there, the one who kept showing up, even when the scripts were cruel and the days were long. My friend's words echoed in my mind. Speak to yourself like someone you love. I didn't know how to do that. I really didn't. But I tried something small, something Aaron Beck would call cognitive reframing, though I didn't think of it that way at the time. I whispered to the mirror, "This thought is loud, but it doesn't mean it's true." The sentence felt awkward at first, like borrowing someone else's clothes, but it was honest, and it didn't hurt. That mattered. Then I added another line, softer, almost embarrassed to say it out loud in an empty bathroom. "I'm allowed to learn slowly." The mirror didn't congratulate me. It didn't transform into some glowing symbol of inner peace. It just held the moment. And that was enough. I reached for a notebook, one I usually use for work tasks, and for the first time in years I wrote something for myself. On the left side, I wrote the thoughts that had been shouting at me. I'm behind, I'm failing, everyone else is ahead. On the right side, I wrote small counter thoughts, not grand, not fake, just balanced. I'm on my timeline. I'm growing at a human pace. I only see their highlights, not their reality. It felt like a tiny act of rebellion, a private protest against the harsh narrator in my head. That afternoon, I took a short walk outside. The weather was warm, one of those mid-season days when the air smells a little like rain even though the sun is out. I walked past a cafe where a barista was laughing with a customer. Their joy felt possible. Not mine yet, but possible. I kept walking until I reached a small park. Kids were running around, shouting and falling and getting back up. A father was pushing a stroller while talking gently to the baby inside. A couple sat on a bench, sharing a sandwich. It wasn't a perfect moment. It was an ordinary one. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I was allowed to have ordinary moments too, without turning them into metrics, without judging them. A line from Michael Singer drifted into my mind, a paraphrase I once read in an article. You are not the voice in your head. You're the one who hears it. At the time I first read it, it felt too abstract, too big, too mystical. But standing there in the park, watching life unfold in small, imperfect ways, the meaning landed differently. If I'm the one who hears the voice, then maybe I'm also the one who chooses how much power it gets. It wasn't a salvation. It wasn't a miracle. It was a shift, soft but real. Later that evening, the scratched mirror greeted me again. But this time, it didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a witness, a companion I'd misunderstood. Its scratches didn't distort me. They reminded me that everything real has imperfections. I rinsed my face, turned off the harsh light, lit a small candle I hadn't used in months, and in that warm glow, I realized something I'd missed for years. All my life, I'd believed the story that growth had to look dramatic, fast, impressive. But the truth, the human truth, is that most healing is quiet, slow, uneven. It looks like someone writing 3 simple lines in a notebook. It looks like someone saying one kind sentence to themselves in the mirror. It looks like someone choosing to pause instead of spiral. It looks like someone beginning again. I breathed out, a long, steady breath, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. The mirror reflected a different version of me. Not cured, not fixed, but softer. A person beginning to understand that self-worth isn't earned by speed or achievements or comparison charts. It's earned by staying with yourself, even when the thoughts turn cruel. That night, I didn't promise myself perfection. I didn't make a huge plan or a dramatic vow. I just whispered, "Let's try again tomorrow." And the mirror seemed to nod back. Here's what I remember most from the days that followed. It wasn't some grand revelation or sudden confidence. It was small things, quiet things, things that would have slipped past me before because they didn't look like progress. But after that night in the bathroom, after facing that fogged mirror and my own unraveling, I started noticing what I usually rushed past. One morning, the sunlight coming through my kitchen window hit the scratched mirror in this soft, gold way. It made the scratches look almost gentle, like tiny roads on a map leading inward. I stood there with my chipped mug in hand. Strong coffee, too hot.
Just the way I needed it. And for a second, I felt something like calm. Not happiness, not confidence, just enough. Enough to breathe without rushing. Enough to stand without flinching. Enough to say, "I'm here." And that's something. That was new for me. I'd spent so many years sprinting towards some invisible version of better. I forgot what it felt like to actually be present, to hear the kettle click off, to taste the first sip of morning coffee, to feel the cool tile under my feet, to listen to the world waking up instead of listening only to the thoughts that told me I wasn't doing enough. I kept thinking about what Michael Singer wrote, or at least my memory of it. You're not the voice in your head, you're the one who hears it. The more I sat with that line, the more I realized how often I treated my thoughts like laws instead of suggestions, as if every critical sentence was a truth I had to submit to. But witnessing something isn't the same as obeying it. That difference, that tiny, almost invisible difference, felt like the beginning of something I'd been missing for a long time. I didn't change everything overnight, but I did start making small choices. Choices that made my life feel just a little more mine. I shortened my to-do lists. I walked slower in the mornings. I let myself sit down when I was tired instead of pushing through. I said, "I need a minute," when I felt overwhelmed. One afternoon, I even let myself take a nap. A real one. The kind where you sink into the pillow and let the world be quiet for a while. I woke up startled, like I'd done something rebellious. I guess in a way I had. The scratched mirror became a sort of symbol, not a cliché, not a metaphor I tried to force meaning into. More like a companion that kept reminding me that imperfect things can still reflect truth. It held me accountable in a gentle way, showing me the person who kept trying, even on the days I didn't feel proud of myself. I saw the same scratches every morning, but the meaning started to shift. They stopped looking like flaws. They stopped looking like proof that I wasn't put together enough. Instead, they look like the marks left on something that has survived, something that has been used, touched, trusted, lived with, something resilient. And maybe because of that, I started forgiving myself for being scratched up too. There were still hard days. Of course there were. Days when the "you're behind" voice tried to creep back in. Days when I scrolled too long and compared too much. Days when I felt the old heaviness in my chest. But instead of spiraling, I paused. I practiced noticing the thought instead of believing it. Sometimes I'd put my hand on the bathroom counter, breathe once, just once, and say, "This is a thought, not a truth." Those 7 words changed the shape of my mornings. Something else changed too, the way I talked to myself. My friend's message, "Speak to yourself like someone you love," kept coming back to me. I didn't know how to do that, not really, but I learned one small step at a time. Instead of "I'm failing," I'd say, "I'm learning." Instead of "Everyone is ahead," I'd say, "I don't know their full story." Instead of "I'm too slow," I'd say, "I'm moving at my pace." It felt strange at first, like speaking a new language, but the more I practiced, the more natural it felt. Not perfect, just possible. And that possibility carried me through the days that followed. I think the biggest shift came one night when I caught my reflection in the dark window above the sink.
The apartment was quiet. I'd finished work late. My dinner was simple, rice and vegetables, nothing special. But I stood there, holding my bowl, looking at myself reflected against the night sky, and I didn't feel ashamed. I felt steady. It surprised me. It moved me. It made my eyes sting a little. I whispered to that reflection, part confession, part promise. I'm trying.
And that counts. The scratched mirror in the bathroom echoed that sentiment the next morning. Not with words, of course, but with its quiet, familiar presence. I realized then that healing doesn't always come in big breakthroughs. Sometimes it comes from living gently with yourself for long enough that your inner voice begins to soften. And now, when the old thought, "you're behind," shows up, I don't panic. I tilt my head, breathe once, and answer the way someone who finally trusts themselves would. Maybe, but I'm still going. Here's what I want to leave you with, the same thing I'm still learning every day. Your thoughts don't get the last word. You do. They're loud, yes. They're persuasive sometimes, but they're not you. And they're not the end of your story. Try this tonight. Take one thought that's been hurting you, just one, and write it down. Then write a kinder version beside it. Not perfect, not overly positive, just honest and gentle. Something you can believe even a little. That tiny shift is how new stories begin. Tomorrow morning, when the light hits your mirror just right, scratched or not, let it reflect the truth you're growing into. You're still here. You're still trying. And you're allowed to start again.